Y'all ready for your history?
Get started.
Welcome.
Hi.
Hello, everyone.
To the Pro Audio Suite.
These guys are professional. They're motivated.
Thanks to TriBooth, the best vocal booth for home or on-the-road voice recording. And Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Introducing Robert Marshall from Source Elements and Someone Audio Post, Chicago. Darren Robbo Robertson from Voodoo Radio Imaging, Sydney. Tech to the VO Stars, George the Tech Whittam from LA. And me, Andrew Peters, voiceover talent and home studio guy.
Line up, learner!
Here we go.
And welcome to another Pro Audio Suite. Thanks to TriBooth. Don't forget the code PAP200 to get $200 off your next purchase. And our brand new sponsor, Austrian Audio, making passion heard. Now, today we're talking about something a bit different, but it's an interesting topic, and it's to do with the atmosphere in your studio or your booth. George, it was your idea to talk about this. What inspired it?
It came from a question somebody asked me. Actually, it came up in a Facebook discussion. Somebody was saying she has trouble in her studio being too dry, which for most of us is not really a problem. But in her particular situation, it was. So then she came up with, well, I think I need a humidifier, but isn't that going to ruin my equipment? And so I saw a lot of responses. Some of them were probably spot on, some not. But I thought, hey, this should be something we address because we never have. And I thought we could all put in our 2 cents. So, we're talking about maintaining temperature, maintaining humidity, but also keeping the air clean. All things that have to do with the air you breathe and the air your equipment sits in and your microphone operates in every day, and how much attention should we put to that stuff?
Yep.
Well, it's interesting because, as we know, electrical gear just loves dust. It doesn't matter how much you dust the thing. It's like it's actually falling behind you as you're dusting. So that's always an issue. The other thing, we used to have those negative or positive ionizers. I remember years ago in radio studios I was working in. And I was reading something recently about those things affecting metals, making them either rust or perish or whatever. So I don't know whether that's a fact or what, but Robbo, you had something like that when you were a kid.
Yeah, I had I was talking to George about this before we started recording. I had an ionizer when I was probably 10 or 11, 12, around there. I had childhood asthma. So what, we're talking early to mid-'80s. And my parents came across these things. They were new and fandangled at the time, called an air ionizer. And look, I have a feeling from talking to George before we were recording that basically they introduced iron particles or some sort of particles into the air that weighed down the dust particles and sort of made them fall to the floor as opposed to be floating in the air for me to breathe in. Something.
An ionized particle is if I understand right, it has an extra electron, right?
Okay.
And therefore it's charged one way or the other, and therefore it attracts dust or attracts things and takes
so the
things out of
reason I
circulation.
would sort of think that you probably wouldn't want one of these in your studio is because I remember clearly that this ionizer used to sit next to my bed on my bedside table, and every couple of weeks my mum would have to sort of come in and scrub the bedside table because it would get this sort of black soot sort of thing all over it, which I presume was caused by whatever the ionizer was doing. But it did a great job. I never had problems with my asthma. Full credit to my parents. Wherever they got the inspiration to buy this thing from, one was completely spot on because it worked. But I remember it used to leave this mess behind, and I can't imagine that you'd want that sort of stuff floating around in your studio. But I'm sure since then the technology's also come a long way, no doubt.
The technology really has, yeah.
I only ever run a humidifier for the piano in my studio, and besides that, and the guitars, just try to keep it in the winter, because here in Chicago it gets really dry in the winter, but besides that, don't do much.
Yeah.
Now, microphones don't care about being too dry, but they don't like being too wet, right?
Sure.
Yeah, correct. I used to have here's an interesting thing, my U87s for the longest time, eventually what can happen is the gold can kind of evaporate off the diaphragm, and you can get a little hole in the diaphragm, apparently.
Wow.
Really old microphones this can happen with. And what I found with that U87 is that if you got too close to it and you were singing, your breath would get on it and it would short the mic out from front to back because the moisture would make it across. And then you would just get a mute until it took like 10 seconds to dry itself out. And that's kind of the sign of at least a diaphragm that is starting to go, is if you kind of give it like a...
Oh, wow.
That
and
was
it shuts
happening
down.
to one of my clients who used 67s. Yeah, I didn't know why
Yeah,
it was
so
happening, but it was
the
happening.
diaphragm needs to be resputtered.
Interesting. Okay.
Which it happens, it's like apparently, I guess literally the gold can kind of evaporate or eventually flake off or somehow end up not where it's supposed to be anymore.
So if your environment is on the humid side, let's say you live in Florida if you're in Florida, you have 99% chance you have an air-conditioned house, and then you're in a dry environment.
It's drying out. Yeah.
But if you're in a truly damp, if you're in the deep South or Philly and you don't have air conditioning, where I'm from, should you be concerned? Or if it sounds good, it is good. Nothing to worry about.
I think only if you're if it's so damp, how if you leave stuff like in your basement, at least this can happen in a damp basement in Chicago. Yeah. Well, not even that, just you go back and the screws get just a little surface rust starts to happen on some pieces. And you're like, they've not been sitting in water or anything. It's just the air is that damp, and that can happen in a basement. But that's excessive moisture.
So you'd probably say it's a bad idea to run a humidifier inside the actual studio, or I think in this case the person has a booth and she was concerned about running the humidifier in the booth. I was thinking, no, don't run it in the booth, run it outside the booth in the room, and just let the booth circulate the humidity from the humidifier, right? I think
the thing about running a humidifier in a really closed environment is that it can possibly condense on the surfaces, or where's it going to go? You want it to get into the air and whatnot. So if you blast a humidifier into the wall, it's going to condense almost by, I don't know, maybe you do if it's really dry in there. Maybe you do want to humidify that. But I don't think it's going to mess with your mic too much unless you're creating a rainforest.
I think you said, unless the microphone is in old or poor condition, not likely going to be an issue. Now, it's interesting. We were talking about the Octava mics earlier in comparison to the Austrian Audio CC8s. And I had a pair of those, and the only time I ever had any problems with my Octavas was using them out in the field. And I distinctly remember trying to record the ocean sounds in South Jersey.
And having problems?
In a pretty moist environment. And they would start to do what we sometimes call motorboating. Have you ever heard a microphone, what they call motorboating?
No.
I've heard of motorboating, but it's got nothing to do with a microphone.
Yeah, no, it ain't that.
Yeah.
That's for the other podcast, Robbo.
Yeah, that's right. That's the other one he does.
No, they call it motorboating because it makes a sort of a pulsing, fluttering sound. If you've ever heard a mic do that, it's probably because of moisture.
Okay.
I think actually that's one of the things that
and it was fine.
I think that's actually one of the things that the good old MKH series is designed for, because they don't work with a direct voltage off the capsule. And if you're familiar with what MKH...
It's an RF mic.
It's an RF mic, right? And that makes it very resilient to weather issues, and I believe also moisture. For anybody who's curious what an RF mic, it's radio frequency. What they do is they run a tone, almost like an FM tone, across the diaphragm, and then when the diaphragm changes its physical position, it changes the frequency of that tone just a little bit, and then they demodulate it, just like tuning into a radio station, and there's your audio, and that makes it somehow more resilient to weather. And I guess there's other advantages to the MKH radio RF mic approach, but that's what it is for you geeks out there.
Interestingly, the comment you made before about condensation. So if you're in if your booth is super, super cold, like really freezing cold, is your breath going to affect the mic?
I don't think your breath affects the mic. Well, first of all, your breath could affect the mic just in the sense that it gets on the mic and it weighs it down, right? It's just physical weight on the diaphragm. But too much moisture, I'm sure, is not definitely a good thing. I mean, you'd think that most equipment, except for instruments, would not but most electronics, I think, would be perfectly happy in a dry environment.
You know, the C414, the EBs and the C12s and stuff, the early ones had the brass C12 capsule. And then the later ones, they changed out to the nylon capsule. And everybody wants the brass capsule. But the thing is about the brass capsule, it does get affected by temperature. So it can shrink and grow depending on what the temperature is, where the plastic one retains its form no matter what the weather is.
Across temperature better?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, that's my theory. Whether it's true or not, I have no idea, but I'm assuming it is.
I'm not sure.
I'm just reading some different forum posts, and these are not from like authorities, just people that think they know. So I'll take it all with a grain of salt.
So
But
so people like us.
Yeah,
Yes,
guys that also think they know what they're talking about. They're saying shoot for about a 45 to 50% humidity in a studio environment, ideally, and that's not just for microphones, but for pianos and acoustic instruments, maintaining them, their tuning and all that stuff. So that's a good goal to shoot for. So if your normal humidity is like 20%, you'll definitely need a humidifier, and then a good quality humidifier will have a good humidistat. So you can set precisely your humidity.
Are there instruments in this studio, or is this just it's a booth? It's a voice actor's booth,
I think
right?
they're worried about the microphone more than anything. But
I would worry about your voice and your comfort and how you want to be. And it's probably going to be well within range of what the microphone can handle. But if you were really worried about the microphone, personally, I would. If it was only about the microphone, I think I'd make it dry in there.
Yeah,
but
dry is better than wet. But for a voice.
For a person's voice, you wouldn't want that.
Yeah, you don't want dry.
That'd make it good for your voice.
That's right.
Yeah, your mouth.
I think the microphone's got a pretty
worse.
broad range of sort of temperatures or moistures. Like, what is it, barometers that it can deal with? I'm not sure what.
If your mouth is very dry and you're in a dry environment, you're definitely going to get more mouth noise, right? Like if you have a properly humidified environment, you'll probably deal less with mouth noise. Mouth clicks.
When I talk underwater, I never hear any mouth noise.
I know a few people who can talk underwater.
That should be true. I drink water.
Hey, here's one that I've often thought of, but not so much in terms of humidity, but in terms of dust, right? I'm reasonably religious with my computers in terms of cleaning them and opening them up and getting rid of all the dust off the fans and stuff. And maybe in music studios, this isn't so much of an issue because you're reasonably regularly changing mics to suit the purpose of what you're doing. But when you're doing voiceover, you've only got one or two mics. They hang for a long time. And this is an honest to God question because I've never really known. Should I be like vacuuming my mic?
I'd be concerned with vacuuming too close and causing a static event.
There are some very expensive electronics specific vacuum cleaners that have anti-static capabilities.
Yeah.
But I think there's some cheap ones too. They make little small vacuum cleaners for vacuuming electronics specifically. So maybe look for one of those. I also, if the vacuum cleaner is powerful enough, I guess you could theoretically damage a diaphragm.
Yeah, I would have thought so. Yeah,
You could probably pull that diaphragm. Certainly, you can fix a speaker that's been like shoved in with a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. Well, see, I've got a vacuum that you can adjust the power on, so I certainly don't go into my computer and blast the living crap out of it. I've usually got it down on a reasonably low setting. So if I was ever going to do my mic, I would do the same, but still.
Sure. I would think that to me more the concern is just like vacuum cleaners tend to build up static electricity in the air because they have a spinning motor kind of situation.
Yep.
And I just wouldn't want to like shock the mic or blow a little diode or something that you're not aware of.
So you're better off blowing it out then? Is that what we're saying? Use some compressed air and blow it? Is that what you would do? Or do you need to do it at all?
I don't think you need to.
I would just treat it really nicely with a nice rag.
Yeah.
Maybe a tiny bit of moisture on a rag and just clean it by hand.
I'd be really careful cleaning the mic other than the chassis. Yeah. If it's anything on the inside of the grill, I would send it in once every, 10 years or something.
Yeah.
And have it clean.
Yeah.
But there are data vacs and electronics vacs that vacuum cleaners. So you can, I'm seeing them ranging in price from $100 and up. So not terribly expensive, but you can find one.
Don't open the mic up. I'm not suggesting that.
No, I would never do that.
Yeah. So if you're going to vacuum anything electronic, they recommend using an anti-static vacuum for anything with electronics, generally.
Yeah. My old C414, it's a 1983 model, it had a couple of capacitors that went a bit pear-shaped, so it had to be fixed because it lost a lot of gain. Anyway, when the guy pulled it apart, the capsule was perfect, wasn't even dirty, and that was 40 years old.
That's incredible. They must have a good screen in there that catches a lot of dirt and dust.
And it wasn't. It hadn't been used. You can tell. It's had an interesting life. But
Gotcha.
It was in great nick. So
well, you were talking earlier about filters, dust, et cetera, et cetera. There is a pretty high end air filter that I'd say is still within the realm of affordability if you're really if you really need something like this. But there's a company called the Molecule. It's spelled MOLEKULE. And it's using different kind of technology to remove not just like particulates, but even viruses. And it's interesting. Do you want to hear about the technology?
Yeah, sure.
I just happen to have this queued up here. They call it Pico technology. Here's what they had to say.
Inside the heart of every molecule air purifier is a unique process called Pico, or photoelectrochemical oxidation. Molecule Pico filters are high-efficiency filters coated with a proprietary nanocatalyst. As UVA light photons strike the nanocatalyst, hydroxyl and other radicals are created on the surface of the filter from water vapor. These are highly unstable molecules that only exist for a moment before rebalancing with the air. As pollutants pass over the filter, the hydroxyl radicals react and break them apart into natural, harmless elements like water and carbon dioxide. Finally, new radicals are created, ready for the next pollutant. Molecule, beyond filtration. Next level.
Okay, you get the point.
Yep.
So that's the advertisement, obviously.
Yeah.
That's not like an independent scientific journal reviewing it. But that being said, yeah, if you're really dealing with some serious air issues, if you have asthma, if you have trouble sleeping, or if you're having trouble in your booth, maybe you got a booth that has a lot of VOCs because of the paint and the carpet, something like this might be a really good idea to run in your booth when you're, at night when you're sleeping, and just keep the room clean.
I've actually got a Russell Hobbs Mountain Breeze, it's called, which is the same thing, HEPA filters and all that kind of stuff, which purifies the air, which I've had in here for years, in fact. I don't run it very often. Maybe I should run it more often.
Yeah, I mean, I have one. I have a pretty big one. That's like, I would say it's much larger than needed in my bedroom because it was a special deal on Amazon. And it's not something we think about that often. We're lucky because we're near the coast. Our air is naturally relatively clean here. It's because of the onshore breeze and all that stuff. We're lucky. Those folks far east of us of LA, sorry. If you lived in San Bernardino, points east of Los Angeles, we have arguably the worst air quality in the United States. So for those of you out there in those areas, definitely consider something like this.
They're really good fun too, because if you turn it on and fart, it goes mental.
Dear.
Does it splash all kinds of lights and stuff telling you?
The fans go crazy. Anyway.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite,
With thanks to TriBooth.
and Austrian Audio. Recorded using Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters. And mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging.
With tech support from George the Tech Whittam.
Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website.
theproaudiosuite.com.